Good evening. I'm Mary Beth Kravets, Director of College Counseling at Wolcott College Prep, and I want to welcome you to this evening's important program. The news is filled with so many obstacles. Small colleges are closing. Some highly selective colleges are opening satellite campuses in different locations. International applicants are facing challenges in getting visas. Legislators are setting rules on admission to state universities. Majors are being eliminated, costs are skyrocketing, and applicants are trying to understand early decision, early actions, single choice early action, and regular decision. All of these questions, changes, and mandates add to a confusing state of college admission. Tonight, we hope to answer some of the questions to pave the way for students and families to be more knowledgeable and less anxious as they approach this college search and application process. A quick reminder that tonight's webinar will be recorded and available on our website at wolcottcollegeprep.org. Also, if you have questions, please use the Q&A button, and we will do our best to get to them, provided we have time at the end of the program. My favorite part of tonight is to be able to introduce you to two individuals who have been my mentors, professional colleagues, and good friends for many years. It is an honor to welcome our two exceptional panelists. Between the two of them, they have dozens of years of extensive experience at numerous institutions. Together, we will address many questions about the current state of college admissions. Thank you, André Phillips, Executive Director of Admissions Recruitment at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Risa Tewkesbury, Associate Director in the Office of Undergraduate Admission at the University of Southern California, for joining us and for leading the way through the many important topics related to the current state of college admissions. With all the media coverage in the news, I know that André and Risa will give you the bright and positive side of what goes on behind the curtains of admission. So I'd like to start with André and ask you if you could give your couple of minutes of inspirational opening.
Good evening, and thank you, Mary Beth, for that warm and generous introduction. As Mary Beth said, I've been at this work for a few years. In fact, I've stopped counting the years, and I now count my decades in the profession. I really have two things I'd like to share as I open. But first, I need to apologize in advance. My wife and I, we have an adorable 5-year-old. He's still a puppy as far as we're concerned. And so I'm sharing with you our little Neville. But I have a reason for sharing Neville, and I hope that you will think of this as well. As you think about all that Mary Beth suggested and the changes and the potential stress there is around the college process, keep in mind that you probably have a pet just like we do, or you are thinking about a pet, and they will help keep you grounded, just as Neville keeps us grounded. And as you can see, Neville is prepared to answer questions, so I do hope you'll have them. The two things that I really want to share with you. One, yes, this is a process that's challenging. It's confusing. Depending on the admissions professional you visit with around the questions you have, you're likely to hear different things, maybe even conflicting things about your process. I would encourage you, I would hope that this is the case, that you will continue to ask these important questions, but you'll do what I would like to encourage all prospective students and parents to do. And that's to work on the all-important follow-up question. I say this to my team, I share it with you, because we've heard most of your first questions, we have quick answers. And we have answers that are applicable to our institution. But to really dig in a little bit more, start thinking about what would you do if someone answered the question just the way you expected it. You might feel like, okay, I'm asking the right question, I have what I need to know. But maybe, just maybe, there's more to the answer. And when you think about that, you're coming up with yet another question. So start thinking about questions that lead to engagement, which is really important. And the engagement is really about what you're interested in. Here's the second thing, and this is, if you will, just a bit of advice. As you think about where you imagine yourself, if you're going to stay close to home, if you're going to travel across the country, if you're going to move to a different region of the country, I want you to start thinking about the why. Why is that important to you? And then you think about if you had the opportunity to tell someone like me, this is why I want to attend your institution. Remember, we're not just admitting students, we're not just admitting you, we're building communities. And we build communities in large part based on the talents, the interests, the skills, even the aspirations that you have for the process. So I conclude by simply saying, Neville and I would very much like for you to approach this with confidence, with excitement, and when given the chance, that you can just crow a little bit about why you are a good match for the college or university that you're most interested in. I wish you good luck in this process.
Thank you, Andre. Again, very inspirational. And I'm sure that it helps them to sort of dial down that anxiety. So I'm going to start with a question for Risa. Current climate of college admissions. What is different this year in comparison to recent years in general and at your own institution?
Well, I think that the biggest thing that's different right now is the daily news cycle. We're just regularly hearing new information coming out, whether it's from the federal government, from state level, from hearing changes at different colleges. Like you mentioned, Mary Beth, colleges closing or changing policies or closing majors. There's been a lot of economic impact on colleges this cycle in a way that we haven't seen before. So I think that that's a big piece of the landscape that in admission, as well as in, the larger landscape of universities we're all dealing with right now. What can we do with possibly less resources or frozen resources or potential threats of litigation and those kinds of things? So I think there's a little bit of element of fear amongst foundations and institutions right now that might not have existed a year ago. But on the upside of that, I think that we all in the profession are moving forward with hope, with aspirations that college still matters, education still matters. The people involved in this process, you as students, as families, you all still matter. And we're going to get through this. It might be a little bumpy, but there's positive news too. We just had, a federal judge say out here in California that no, you can't hold back those funds and tie them to student equity and access issues in terms of research and grants and funding. So there's good news as well as all the uncertainty. So I think that's part of the big picture of what's different this year is that we've all got this in the back of our minds about possible litigation and things. And so we are being careful, but we're all still doing the good work and we're all still really interested in getting to know the students that are applying to our institutions. So I think that's a real positive that remains and that hasn't changed.
Great answer and good information. Andre, I know that there's mandatory state legislative requirements for your admission in Wisconsin. I think it's just to Madison, correct? You're mute.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
There's statewide legislation. There are particular elements of the legislation that only applies to Madison, the flagship.
Okay. So, Andre, college admission testing, SAT, ACT, flexible, blind, required. Where are we going? The new ACT says science is optional. Should they not take it? The writing has definitely been not used. Um, what are you suggesting?
Um, Such a great question, full of a number of points, and I'm going to just pick on three. And one, again, is this idea of why does it matter? So I think the first thing I would encourage families, students, and parents alike, guardians alike, as a list is being built, a student is saying, I'm interested in these 5 places, and it doesn't matter the 5. I think it's important to high point what are the testing expectations for those individual institutions? Because as you rightfully note, Mary Beth, the school down the road may be completely optional and might have been optional long before a number of us had to go optional because of availability and the like. So just if there's any point to really dig in so that you have a clear answer, I would say elevate an understanding of what's required. Now, let me very quickly say this about public flagships. And it's interesting that we're having this conversation this evening. I was on a call earlier today with our Big Ten peers. So places like Illinois, places like Indiana, Penn State, our good friends out west, including USC, UCLA. So, at any rate, just a national group of institutions. And if you were to talk to all 19 of us, you're likely to hear 7 or 8 different things. And so it's important to know that the testing requirement, expectation, whether it's waived, whether or not there's a waiver, or whatever it might be, that's really important to put a little work in just so that you'll know. The last thing I'll say very quickly, for example, at my institution, and this is important language, our regents made a decision at the beginning of COVID, several years ago now, to waive the requirement for testing. And what our regents said, well, we're going to waive it for a limited amount of time. And they've extended the waiver for another year and a half. Who knows what's going to happen a year and a half from now? They may give us another extension. They may make it permanent. They might even say to us, thank you very much. It's time for you to reinstitute testing as a requirement. So I spend a lot of time on this to say to students and family members alike, as you are doing your homework and figuring out, learning a little bit more about what schools will ask applicants to do, at the top of the list, understand the testing policy requirements. That doesn't make testing the single most important factor. You just want to make sure you understand as you put together your package of information, you know what's required at a school around testing.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Risa with a couple of more pushing questions on this testing. So, how does a student decide whether to submit a score to USC?
Well, first off, I do want to follow what Andre said is that different institutions have different policies. So USC is test optional. We get a lot of questions about the UCs since we're also in California. We're, of course, private, they're public. The public institutions in California will not consider test scores. It's not optional. If you send them, they will not be considered. So like Andre said, it's important to check, even if it's just the school down the road, in our case, right across town, you want to make sure that you're paying attention. We also know that some schools were test optional during COVID and have now rejoined test required. Some have testing policies where it could be a different type of test instead of SAT or ACT. They'll consider advanced placement scores or IB scores in place of SAT or ACT. I think the important thing to know is if it's a test optional school, optional means optional. It means it's not a hidden message. It doesn't mean that, well, it's a bigger piece of the pie for your grades or for your essays or other things if you didn't send in a test score. It's just part of the full picture of what you send. I've had a lot of families talk to me about the golden ticket of a perfect test score. That's in no means a golden ticket. We have a lot of students with perfect test scores that do not get admitted. That doesn't mean that there aren't students with great test scores that do, but there's also a lot of students that applied without a test score that were admitted. Because it's the full picture of the student. Also, when we look at test scores, we're looking at test scores in the context of the student. So if you go to a high school where your test score is off the charts, it's higher than the 75th percentile from your high school, that same test score from another high school in another state in another region might be might be more in the 50 percentile or even the 25th percentile for that high school. So we're looking at your test scores in the context of your environment and your school. So that's the first place I would start. If you've taken an exam and you're proud of it, check with your school counselor, check with your school profile, see how that compares for your school group before deciding whether or not to submit that. I will also say one other added note. So even if I have a student that says, I'm not a great test taker, but I did take the test, I thought maybe I should send it, I try to drill down with the student as to the why. And one of the best reasons I've heard for a student saying, I want to send the test score was actually to compensate for something else on their record. Perhaps maybe they didn't do as well in that math class. They had other things going on at the time, maybe family issues, personal health, but they did very well on the quantitative portion of a test. That can be a way to show that quantitative ability. But without that, or if you didn't have a test, that doesn't mean that student wouldn't be admissible. It just means we'd be looking somewhere else. Maybe that letter of rec from the math teacher that says their ability was very strong, but they had to miss some school or something like that. So consider the test score just a piece of the big picture of what we're looking at if it's a test optional school.
When you go online to the internet, you can look at the mid 50% of both Wisconsin, USC, any school. And is it somewhat wise to say that if you're not within that mid 50%, that you might, question, do I want to send the score?
Any mid 50% right now is going to be very skewed based on who's sending test scores.
Right.
We are not actively putting that in our publications. Yes, you can find it, but we don't put it in the publications because the only students sending us test scores these days are students at the high end. So if a student looks at that with a moderate score, they're going to think they're way out of the ballpark, but they could be right in the middle of what we would consider a good solid test score. So again, go back to your school list, not to the profile of who has sent test scores in a test optional environment. If you're looking at a test required school, that's different. Their test scores are going to be more meaningful that they produce, but test optional schools like USC, typically only about half the applicants are submitting test scores. And so you're only getting that middle 50% from the very high end.
Forgive me, Mary Beth. I just want to underscore, Risa made a really important point, and that's as you dig in, trying to determine, okay, does this represent the entire pool of applicants, or is it a select group? And our rule of understanding, not necessarily anything else. We recognize that the lion's share of the students who submit test scores, they feel good about their results and they want us to see them. And in most cases, dare we say, those are students who have really strong results, be it ACT, or SAT. And if you think about it, it's only human nature. If I have really good test scores and really good grades, or it's the best essay I've ever written, and or whatever the case may be, you want someone who's sitting in judgment of your qualifications to see your best. But the other side of that coin, as Risa is rightfully suggesting, that could be, particularly for schools like mine, or any of the schools that are optional, we're presenting, if you find it, really strong scores, and that's not telling the full story about how schools, and particularly schools that are holistic in their review, how they are, how the class is actually being built.
Question on the AP. It was our understanding that because, I mean, our high school doesn't, we don't even offer AP courses. And so there is a place on the Common App to put an AP score, but we understood that those are not used in the evaluation of admission. Is that still true?
That's certainly true for Wisconsin.
Okay.
As I mentioned on the testing, there are some schools, I specifically know some on the East Coast that will consider AP scores in place of an SAT or ACT. So that's in a different scenario. And I was using that in terms of the SAT, ACT test optional question. So that's something to keep in mind. For schools that don't offer SAT or AP or IB, that's International Baccalaureate, don't have those exams, that's not a disadvantage to students. There are quite a few very selective schools that are in the Chicago area, across the country, that don't offer advanced placement or IB curriculum. There's nothing wrong with that. We look at the student in that context. So if a student doesn't have an advanced placement class, but it's not offered at their high school, we would certainly not use that in a criteria holding that against them. That's not a rubric, nothing that we're looking for in our review from a student from that high school. But we do like to see that students have challenged themselves within the curriculum available. So for example, even a student at Wolcott, if they're applying to engineering, we want to see that they've continued on in math. We're not looking for AP calculus because it's not offered. But we are going to want to see that they've taken beyond the very minimum math available and challenged themselves. So it's a matter of the curriculum available at the school.
So, Andre, grade inflation. There are high schools not too far from Chicagoland that have seven levels, and they give, extra bonus points for honors and AP. We've heard, I've been in the counseling world for a long time. We've heard that in general, that you put everything back on a 4-point scale and then look at the rigor of their curriculum. Could you address that?
Briefly, yes. It is absolutely true that there are schools that recalculate in order to standardize their understanding of both preparation for and foundationally for, in their view, the prospect of academic success. So that is a truism in the process. What I gently caution, and it's thematic to something you just heard a moment ago, what sometimes happens, unfortunately, is students and family members alike, as they learn about what the school down the road might offer that we don't offer at our high school, and somehow, unfortunately, feeling like their students are not as competitive. I want to underscore what Risa said, that sort of tied to the level set. We are only trying to understand within what's been available to students in their school. Now, it is true that the overall build of an enrolling class is built on certain expectations of readiness for college level work. But what we will not do institutionally when we are thinking about various levels of availability in a school, we'd like to know the students are challenging themselves, but not unduly so. And that's why it's important for students, whatever the levels might be, for schools to understand, is that the level that in the eyes of those who teach them, they are prepared as best as possible, and that they are not over indulging themselves in coursework just to have the strongest, if you will, look of rigor. Can they actually do the work at a level that they're at? And that's why two other elements are really important to underscore. And I'm a proponent of saying the single most important factor in an application is what students have done over time with what's been available to them. So I'm really talking about course selection and the results. But something that's been said earlier, I also want to underscore, we pay a lot of attention to the voices in the application. That is the writing that students will do in response to the questions we ask them to take, and the voices of recommendations from those who teach or provide guidance and counseling to students over time. Cannot underscore the value of the adult view of a student who either can speak to them directly, having taught them in class, or in the case of Mary Beth, you and your colleagues who spend an inordinate amount of time helping students understand their path. Those elements of a college application, really important to us as we're thinking about whether we're a small college, medium size, or large size. How do we build each class, and what are the voices that, if you will, provide endorsement for us in our selection process? So I run with your question a bit, Mary Beth, but it is really tied to, for me at least, thinking about how do we build each class, and what are the elements that sometimes students may not think about in the ways that we think about them.
That's why I ask and sit back and listen to the answers that you give. Risa, I think that both of your institutions require foreign language as the one of the requirements for admission, and usually it's 2 years for admission. What do you do about students who may not have taken foreign language for a number of reasons? It could be for, a learning difference, or, I know at Wolcott, our students have to take world language. But what do you do when a student has not taken a foreign language?
Whenever we see a student that doesn't have things that we would consider requirements or recommended in the admission process, we hope that they will address anything that's missing. I know sometimes I've talked to families and they're like, well, we didn't want to draw attention to it. Maybe no one would notice. We spend a lot of time looking at the applications. It's always best to get in front of that. If there is a learning challenge that makes learning foreign language difficult for a student, just put that in the additional information space on the application and let us know that, so that we can take that into account. We've also had students that had no foreign language in high school because they were bilingual through other ways. Maybe they went to Hebrew school, or they had language classes on the weekend, or through their own home family environment, they tested for biliteracy. Those kinds of things can take the place of that as well. So we want to understand the full context. If the student doesn't have foreign language, just let us know why. Was there a reason that you didn't choose to take the foreign language? I had a student who I just actually read the application today that actually said, when I got into school, I was so focused on my STEM classes. I wasn't focused on foreign language. I had some foreign language in middle school. I thought that was enough. And by senior year, I realized I'm looking at colleges that want to see it. So I'm taking it for the first time now. Let us know that situation so we can take that into account. We're not going to hold against the student that had different challenges or different experiences with language. Just let us know.
Under question, there was a policy, I know at Wisconsin, that if a student came in and took a 1 semester of language and got a B or better, that they can get 8 retroactive credits. Is that still true?
It's still in place, but I will tell you, if you started looking for that information, you'd have to dig deeply to find it. Something. I feel like I'm Risa's cheerleader, but I'm so excited. I'm hearing some things. I'm reminded of what my first dean many years ago once said to me around your earlier question, Mary Beth. One of the highlights of the application process. How do you highlight your strengths, cover your weaknesses? And then he said, cover doesn't mean ignore. Cover means how do you tell it so that we'll understand it in context. So I think really two things. And it also applies to what I will refer to as the small print of the process. And Mary Beth, you've kind of elevated. That's in the small print, but it is really important if you know how to present your information.
So we're coming to recommendations, and I know Risa and Andre have over the years let me know that I write creative recommendations and really know the student and make sure that I try to help them sort of be in neon lights. But what do you look for in a recommendation from a counselor or a teacher? I'm going to start with you, Andre.
Two things really. Number one, I'll tell you what really excites me, and that is the reason you want me to pay attention to this candidate. And is there something you find compelling such that you want us to know about it? So think of, and I'll use a really fundamental example, and I use myself oftentimes. And I'm fair saying I was not a good math student. I even would imagine that my school counselor would say, I don't know why little Andre decided to take this math course, but here's what I learned about little Andre, the person, not necessarily the mathematician, because he's not that good, but as a person and as a student. So I'm hoping that a recommendation either from a teacher or a counselor will help me understand the qualities of the young man or the young woman that they are recommending. And it could be very personal. It could be the fact that when little Andre walks in the classroom, his excitement about being there elevates the rest of the class, or his table mate, or whatever the case may be. That helps me as someone teaching the class, because I know that little Andre is there for a reason. He's there to learn, and he's willing to put the work in. Things like that will help us a great deal, because again, what's thematic for me, when I'm thinking about my campus community, obviously, I want students who are going to be able to find success in the classroom, but citizenship matters just as much, if not more. And so I want to know that enjoying this community where students are from all over the country and from 50 countries outside of the U.S. and whatever the composition of the class, this is going to be a citizen for whom being a part of our community makes it a better community.
Yeah, super answer. Thank you. Risa, I'm going to ask a question on college essays. And Andre started out in one of his comments about digging deep, into the school to understand, why that school, why that major, which a lot of colleges will ask that question, and they don't want to know that you're, by the ocean, or that sunshine, or that you have, flamingos on the top of Bascom Hill, and et cetera. But so I know that one of the big questions now is about lived experiences, and my question, Risa, is how might one answer that? And I know at USC, I think you have what, four essay questions, 3? I'm trying to remember.
Only have one essay question. That's the Common App question, but we do have additional short answer questions.
Right. So, why supplemental questions? When they've answered that main question, and what are some common mistakes?
First off, I want to address the main question, the essay, that all students will submit. And, whether if you're applying to USC and Wisconsin, Andre and I are going to read the same essay because, it's one essay that you've written for your colleges. That essay is your voice, your opportunity to share about yourself in a way that we're not going to get from a transcript or just looking at your activities. It's a chance for students to talk about their passions, their community, who they are, and really who they want us to know about as far as who's sitting in front of us as an applicant. So when I read a file, the choice of what a student talks about in their essay is often much more important than their sentence structure and how many three-syllable words they can throw into the essay. We want to get to know you as an applicant, and so we're trying to see, like, okay, what was important enough for you that you put that as the topic of your essay that you wanted to share? Now at USC, we have a supplemental question that you already alluded to, Mary Beth. That's the what do you want to study and why at my institution? If Andre's application has the same thing, please don't send us the same response because you would not describe our two colleges in the same way. That goes for whether it's a school across town or it's a school in across country. You want to be thinking specifically about that college. And if I read an essay or a short answer, excuse me, for that response that says, because I want to be the best possible biology major and I want to be the best possible doctor when I go to med school because I care about people and I want to improve medical care for people in my community. That's all wonderful and admirable, but it says nothing about why my institution, and that response could have been used for every school the student applied to that has a biology major, which quite frankly is most of them. So that didn't answer the question. The question needs to be why my institution? And unfortunately, the biggest mistake we see in this is students will do a template of what they want to say to each of their colleges, and they do a quick Google search of what's the name of a class I can drop in and say that's why I want to take that class. I do not believe any student is choosing to come to USC because they saw in our catalog a 500 level course. So when that's dropped into that, I know that that student hasn't really done their homework. They haven't thought about why USC is a good fit for them. So students should be addressing the institution, the student life, the programs, the unique opportunities. Maybe it's the research opportunities, but it should be as authentic an answer as possible because we're really trying to see, is that student looking for the fit of my institution? Because ultimately, as Andre alluded to in holistic review, what we're looking for is that fit. Is the student a fit for our institution? And a student that's a great fit for us might not be a great fit for somewhere else. It's really about, making that match, trying to find that, group that goes together. Also, and I know this wasn't part of your question, but I'm going to tag on to something about the letters of recommendation. I know we've got people joining us this evening that didn't all go to Wolcott. Mary Beth, you do a fabulous job. Your students are so lucky that you get to know them and do such a thorough job. But if you are on this call right now and you go to another institution and you think my counselor doesn't know me and that's not an opportunity I have, find that teacher, that club sponsor, that person that does know you. Because when we read letters of recommendation, as Andre indicated, we're trying to get to know you. And it's about your character, not that you got an A in the math class, because that's going to be on the transcript. We want to get to know what makes you a positive member of your school community so that we can see you as that positive member on our school community.
That's a great comment because there are some high schools where the counseling load is 250 or 300 or 400 students. And so teacher recommendations are very helpful. Andre, demonstrated interest. I'm writing to Andre every other week to say I love Wisconsin, on Wisconsin. I want to be a Badger. I want to jump around. Um, and then I'll get to Risa, just between the two of you. Um, what are effective ways of showing genuine interest? And how do you evaluate that interest?
Thanks, Mary Beth. I think for us, and this is specific to my institution, this idea of demonstrated interest uh, doesn't play a role in how we review. So, for example, your example, Mary Beth, the student who constantly writes and updates their file, but then that doesn't help our process. And that doesn't mean that it's not a real thing for other places, but at our place it isn't. However, in first off, submitting an application, you've demonstrated interest. Start with that. We don't do interviews, so there's no rubric to give you style points. We don't track if you come to campus, and we want you to come to campus. We want you to visit. We want you to take a tour. We want you to take advantage of our information session where you potentially can ask questions. You'll certainly learn some things. If one of our schools or colleges or departments offer a specialty session and you've got time, we want you to go do all of those things. Do those things. That helps you as an applicant put together a better application. That potentially helps you once you receive your positive decision that you've been admitted, you know more. But at the point of application review, we're not counting style points. We're not counting, and I should say this as well, we do not have a legacy process. So if mom or dad are proud alums and they've put you in your onesies and your twosies with Bucky Badger, that's great, but that doesn't give you a style point. So I think for us, and I would say it's a good thing to ask the very question you're asking. Number one, do you utilize what do you utilize? What's in the process? What's not? And that'll help a long way. So I run with this one because it is institutional specific. It's a great set of questions to ask. You may get different answers.
So, Risa, I mean, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it too. And some of the students will do online, can't get across to California, and they'll do online virtual info sessions, virtual tours. If you offer virtual, access to a professor or a department, what's your thoughts on this?
Exactly as Andre said, an application is an excellent way to demonstrate interest. That's the first thing for us. We are not tracking interest. We do not consider that when we're reading applications as to whether a student has visited or not. But just as Andre said, we provide all of those information opportunities, virtual tours, online immersive tours, all the opportunities to engage with us. We travel around the country and around the world to meet with families and students. But that's all in order to help the student determine if we are a good fit. And then if they feel that that is, be able to tell us that in that short answer. When I mentioned the why do you want to study at USC, that's what we call our fit question. Some schools, it's a full essay. For us, it's only 250 words, but interacting with us, all of those different things, maybe you want to put in there because you grew up wearing your Wisconsin onesies and twosies, and that's a family tradition. Maybe that's part of your why. But all of those opportunities are things that give you the chance to see if we're a good fit. When we all give you our admission decisions, unless you're doing some early type program, you'll have about a month to make a final decision. It's a really good idea to try to determine fit before you apply to the schools, not wait to see if you've been admitted when you only have 1 month to weigh all your different options. So we really encourage you to have those interactions with those schools, those colleges, the information sessions to determine if we are a good fit before you submit the application. And then tell us why you thought so.
I'm going to continue with you, Risa. Extracurricular activities. On the Common App, they give you 10 spots to put in your activities, and they give you 150 characters to describe it. And some students have only had a job, and school. So what's your sage advice to students in that section?
First of all, 150 characters is short for me, for you, for Andre, for our kids that are used to doing those little short responses on their tweets and whatnot. That's probably fine. So that's not a handicap for a lot of our students. However, the number of activities students are involved in, that's really going to vary by student. What we're looking for is commitment to something outside the classroom. That could be taking care of a grandparent. It could be helping care for younger siblings or taking care of Neville the dog. It could be, being involved in that part-time job or helping the family business. Those are all excellent signs of responsibility that we're not going to get from being a member of 15 clubs that you showed up for the yearbook photo. We want to see commitment to something. So if you've got one or two things that you've been committed to, even if they are not traditional school-based activities, that's totally fine. On the other hand, a student that is very actively involved in those things and says, but I didn't have time for a job. She mentioned the job. That's okay too. Some students don't have a chance to have that other activity, or some students, and I know this is true for some of yours, Mary Beth, the commute is part of what they're doing outside of school. If they're spending a long time just to get to school, that's going to cut into their opportunity for outside activities and things. So all of that, again, I know I've used the word context many times, but making sure to let us know what that full picture is of how you're spending your time outside the classroom.
Andre, to further talk about this a little bit, there's a section on the Common App called Additional Information. And for a student who may have done an internship, if they've done it, or written a particular science project, or they have a musical a talent that they want to show you about, but they're not going to use Slide Room because they're not applying to music. Should they, would they, could they put an access to a PDF file in that additional information section?
That's a great question, Mary Beth, and I'm going to give you two answers.
Good, okay.
For places like USC and Wisconsin and I focus on our Big Ten partners, but there are other places with sizable applicant pools. As important as it would be to have a link to further information, clips, musicals, whatever the case may be, the reality is we simply do not have the time. Most of our application reviews are 12 to 15 minutes. And by the time we get through, the question previously was about activities and the short answer question. That's pretty powerful for a student to give me 149 words to describe that they've been playing the oboe since the age of 3 or whatever the example might be. And yes, I would love to then sit and listen to 4 to 7 minutes of that plank, but I do not have the time. So I say for some of us, we don't have the time. Now, hard stop. I mentioned music, and I mentioned that specifically because we do have a talent review for the arts in certain areas of the arts. That doesn't come to the admissions office, but you should send it to the music department. Because if they like what they hear in that 4 to 7 minutes, you get an audition where you actually get to. Now, what the music department would do is give us, and they would write a thumbs up, thumbs down. Little Andre, we brought him in, but he's really not ready to join our orchestra. And then we have to figure out what to do with that. And so I use that just simply to say. Now, last thing, very quickly, smaller colleges, or if you will, talent-based programs, they may ask for the additional information, or of course, they may actually ask students to participate in an audition. So I think I hate to use it depends, but it really depends on, in some cases, sticking to what schools are asking for. And places like mine, we just don't ask for it.
Okay, Risa, building your class. Geographic. I know that all colleges like to say we have students from every state in the United States and X number of countries. Um, you look at many factors in building your class. Is that yearly that you get a new directive on the class for the year?
Well, as far as directives for the class, it's typically, quite frankly, more on the number of students and the number of students by different areas. We want to have students spread across the university with different interests. And, Andre just used the music department. We can't have a band that only has trumpet players. We want to see some students from different instruments and things like that. We don't have any quotas by city, by state, by high school, by country. So as a private institution, our students can come from all over. In a given year, we may have more or less from Illinois or Wisconsin than we had from the year before. It just depends on the applicant pool. I actually get the quota question a lot from students at a high school when they know a lot of kids from their high school are applying to USC, and they worry that that's going to hurt their chances because they think we might have a quota by high school. We do not. In a given year, we might take 20 from the same high school and the next year take one. It just depends on the students applying in that given year. So our directives, I will say back when I first started at USC, we had a president that was very fond of saying he had a student from every single state. And so it was often the conversation about, did we get anyone from North Dakota this year? And how about West Virginia and things like that? That doesn't come up anymore. That's not part of our process. We do talk about how many states are represented, but we know in any given year, we probably have every state and over 100 countries represented in our class. It just might not be in the freshman class. So we're not really hung up on directives by state or by region at this point.
Andre, I have two questions for you. One has to do with the state mandate of taking the top 5% from every high school in state, which then leaves what for out of state? And the second question has to do with those students who say they want to study business, or does the major play a role in that admission decision?
Great set of questions, and I will try to do this succinctly and do it justice. First off, we are mandated by our Board of Regents to have at least 3,600 students from our state. We are the flagship. Now, our overall goal is to enroll anywhere between 84 and 8,500 students in any given year. But we absolutely start with, are we meeting the mandate? I will tell you that I share this carefully, but we always make sure that we put a few more Wisconsinites in the class. So mandate calls for 36. We likely will enroll 37. Just that's a little bit of insider information. But that's important to us that we meet the requirement, but we also are doing our very best because of this top 5%, which is a new thing for us. And we've had 1 year of meeting a state mandate to admit all students who are in the top 5% of their high schools from the state of Wisconsin. This is not applicable if you're from California, Illinois, Missouri. It only applies to Wisconsin. And here's the other thing I want to say on the chance that there's some Wisconsinites on this call. If we were, and this is the case, we recognize, for whatever the reason, top 5% from Wisconsin students are likely getting admitted to a lot of other places. So those students are going to have choices. And what we discovered this past year, a significant number of those students said, thank you, no thank you, I'm on my way somewhere else. And so we also want to make sure that students who are outside of the top 5%, but meet the expectations we have, those students will get admitted. So we're not filling up. Here's the last thing I want to say very, very quickly as we think about these two questions. Our goal, our aspiration, is that we have the kind of broad representation across our state, across our country, and across our world. We're fortunate that our applicant pool gives us those opportunities, but students really have to do what they need to do. And I think in some ways, it's similar that a lot of places will say, our top 2 or 3 expectations is not that we're going to build this comprehensive map. You can't build it if you don't have it. We're fortunate that our pool is such that we do have good choices. But at the end goal, and I repeat myself when I say this, citizenship is as important, in some cases, maybe even more important than just having the academic profile, because being and living in the learning environment carries a lot of weight on many, many college campuses. Certainly, that's the case at Wisconsin.
And what about major? If they put down business, or they put down psychology, or they put down, speech pathology?
Absolutely. Across the 8 schools and colleges, 130 majors, the 2 schools and colleges that start out with needing applicants to identify early. For us, it's engineering and business. In engineering, they ask us in the Office of Admissions and Recruitment to admit every year. They would like to have 1,200, 1,300 students, to admit them all. The business and applicants need to, at the point of application, Risa was talking earlier about that short answer question, the why question. If you are interested in engineering, it's important to kind of state, I'm interested in engineering, and here's the area I think I would like to pursue, or I know I would like to pursue. And so students have to do a little bit of homework to determine whether or not nuclear engineering is what they really want, and then speak to, if they have it, evidence of why they want to pursue nuclear or chemical or whatever the case may be. In business, the business school will ask us to admit 2/3 of the enrolling class. So the business school would like to have about 1,000 students join them every fall. About 700 of those students are students that they ask us to select. The remaining 300, give or take, are students that are currently undergraduates at Wisconsin. And most of, not all, but most of those students applied initially. They were admitted to the university, but not into business. And they said, I want to be a Badger and I remain interested in business. They come to the university, they pick a program, and if they remain wedded to the idea that they want to pursue business at Wisconsin, they can reapply during their first year, their freshman year of college.
Risa, anything from your end of the major that they might put down on an application?
Yes, and thank you, Mary Beth, because while Andre was speaking, I wanted to point out to families and students, especially I get so many students that will ask me about, well, I'm weighing between different choices, or I'm not truly excited, or I'm undecided. I've got 5 that I'm interested in. Some students have known what they wanted to do since they were small children. My son knew he wanted to be an engineer from, the get-go. We've got pictures of him playing with space shuttles when he was a 5-year-old, and he works for a space industry and rocket propulsion now. So he's stuck with it all the way through. Other students have no idea. They get to college to try to figure out what their passions are. I want to remind students that are joining us, the national average is you will change your major 3 times in college. That doesn't count between now and your first day of college. So if you don't have it figured out, don't panic. Give yourself some space and some grace to try to figure it out. Most colleges, there's some flexibility there of changing majors. Different institutions will have different policies. There may be a particular major at a school that if you don't start from the get-go, it's hard to start into that later. But keep that in mind when you're looking at your colleges. If you're truly undecided, don't pick a school that if you are admitted to a major, you cannot change it. Go to a school that will give you that flexibility to have multiple majors or majors and minors or to try different things. And also, depending on when you start college, there may be new majors that you have never heard of or don't exist today that are available to you before you graduate. There are so many different new and exciting fields that are being developed that it may be something that's just not even on the list right now and turns out to be the right fit for you. So just keep that in mind as well. Don't put that pressure on you that you have to have your whole life figured out. I can tell you when I started college, I started out as a fine arts major, changed my major several times, graduated as a business major, and then went into education and counseling. I certainly didn't have it figured out when I was 17 and thought I wanted to be an artist. So give yourself some space to figure it out.
Andre, I'd like to cover the current climate and the diversity issue and those students who, that there used to be check boxes on the application that you could check off who you are and what's, and identify who you are. And that no longer is available. So what are colleges doing to continue to welcome diversity on campus and show their love and heart for diverse students?
I think there are a number of things, but I'm going to focus very quickly on 3. And at the top of the list for me, to the degree that students or those who support them and school counselors live in this world of supporting students, can better help those of us who review applications maybe understand the composition of the school itself. And I think about your school as a perfect example, without you ever saying this is a student from a particular ethnicity, just understanding who says yes to your school or a school down the road, or maybe school admission folk can read and find that information in the profile that you provide. And so a student doesn't have to self-identify in that way of checking a box. We can begin to imagine the community that they're in, and those experiences will present themselves. Another way, students can be their own best advocate in responding again to the why question. So again, it comes back to the power of the voice. And I've used little Andre as an example. I'm going to use little Andre one last time. So little Andre grew up on the west side of Chicago. True story, actually. And little Andre could kind of talk about what it was like to grow up in his neighborhood, North Lawndale, for the students who know Chicago. And just by virtue of talking about what it was like to end up at his high school coming from this homogenous neighborhood and what he brings to his school community, we could, as an applicant reader, begin to put 2 and 2 and 2 to get us to 6. And if we can get to 6, we've got something to work with. Here's the third and final thing that I think is also important when we are thinking about building our class. When students get to that point of telling us how they spend their time outside of the classroom, that's going to speak volumes about what we believe as a citizen in our community. That young person will engage on the college campus, or if it's not there, if we see the passion for it, we're believing this is a student who would go out and make a difference in our broader community, because these activities and these interest areas matter. So there are ways that as a reader of an application, we can intuit without students ever having to say, "Hey, I'm this little guy who's this thing." We have it in the voice and the words that students use.
Nancy, are you there? I think we could take a little time right now to answer some questions that families have put in there, or students, and then I can come back to the wise wisdom that Risa will give us in closing our program tonight.
Sure, yes, we have quite a few on a variety of topics, some that we touched on slightly and some not at all, so I'm just going to go for it. In terms of citizenship, we talked about that a little bit. Do you consider students' social media profiles in evaluating their citizenship qualities? If yes, does this include their likes and shares as well as material they actually post? Who wants to take that question?
Well, I can make a quick answer to that kind of follows what Andre said about all of those extra materials that a student might send us. With over 80,000 applications, we do not have the time or resources in our office to check students' social media. Now, to say that never comes up, I think students should be careful about what they say and what they do, because sometimes that information will get presented to us, whether it be through a counselor at the school and a disciplinary action or things like that. So students should be careful, but no, our office and our staff, we do not have time to be looking up all students' social media and checking on what they've got out there. I will tell you on a very, very fundamental note, which isn't social media, we do get amused sometimes when students are applying using that email address that they created for themselves back when they were a third grader. So that might be something that students want to look at, because we do notice that if it says always wanted to go to Notre Dame as part of their email address, might not be a great fit for USC. So, you might want to go ahead and create that email address that just happens to be your name as opposed to your favorite college of choice.
Good advice. For students, as far as grades, how important is the first semester of freshman year when students may just be getting adjusted to high school versus the rest of the semesters? How do you view grades as they progress?
We always like to see upward progression in classroom performance. And we recognize there is the prospect that the first year of high school, the first semester or the first quarter, depending on the school, may not be the full representation. The fact of the matter is students, and this doesn't mean that you not take it seriously, but there's a really good chance we will have at least 6 semesters of progressive course selection to be able to determine certain patterns of performance. We obviously like to see students starting out strong and staying strong, but we know they're the little Andres of the world who may have soft spots. And over time, we hope that little Andre improves. And so I said I was going to leave little Andre out of this, but forgive me.
We had the conversation earlier about foreign language and if something was missing, and I said, get in front of it, tell us about it. I feel the same way about a transcript. If a student had, maybe it wasn't freshman year, maybe they started off solid, but then we see sophomore year, second semester, the grades dropped, or something else happened as part of their high school program. I always recommend students, it doesn't have to be an excuse for what happened, but owning what happened. Tell us. Maybe you were just too overcommitted to your other activities and you regrouped and you realized time management was important. And now we can see that progress going forward since that experience. Maybe there were other things going on in your life at that time. So share us the context so that we can understand what we're seeing on the transcript.
Thank you, Risa. For students that decide not to submit a test score because it's optional, will this affect their chances of merit scholarship?
Simple answer for us, no. Scholarship selection test scores have no bearing on scholarship selection because we're optional.
Same here.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. How does the state of college admissions impact neurodiverse students, and any particular advice on how to approach the admissions process if you are neurodiverse?
One thing I would say on this, which isn't necessarily how you approach the admission process, but how you approach the college search process. Whatever your circumstances are, make sure that the community and resources are available for you at the institutions to which you apply. Whether that be tutoring resources, extended time resources, note takers, aids for other types of learning differences that you might have. Whatever the circumstances are, we want you to be successful, but not every college has every type of resource available. So make sure you're looking at that as part of your college search. As part of the college application process, it's really up to what you wish to share with us. If it's things that you have overcome, whether it be, health or learning challenges or differences or whatever the case may be. These could be just creative learning methods on your part, and that is not in any way a handicap in the process. It's how you are being successful given the challenges that you have been dealt. So make sure that you're just being as authentic and upfront about your circumstances that you are comfortable sharing. You don't have to share anything that you are not comfortable sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a good point. Okay. We touched on college essays, but we didn't talk much about AI and college essays. Would either or both of you comment on the use of AI in college essays and what you've seen, and make some recommendations for people listening?
Yeah, this is a good one. I think I'll start us off, Risa, if that's okay with you. And I really have just something very short to say about the tools. Well, I have two things to say about the tools. Truthfully, I have a lot to say about the tools, but here are the two. Number one, we recognize on the college side of the ledger, and I trust students and families recognize that AI as a thing is here to stay. As a result of that, we have an expectation and a belief, quite frankly, that students are going to use the tool as a resource, not as a replacement. So we don't believe that students are going to deploy the opportunities that AI presents to do the work for them. But from a framing perspective, from an organizational perspective, we get that. However, and I'm going to channel what's already been said because it's so important. In our respective review, we are looking for a story that is authentic, we are looking for stories about applicants that are aligned to experiences that students themselves either have had or imagine that they will have in our respective communities, wherever they are. And so the use of the tools, knowing that they are there. And I'll let you in on a conversation that's gaining momentum in colleges and universities around the country, particularly those of us who require the extended essay writing. Those essays, while still important, in some university communities, their stature is not what it once was. And there is a suspicion, for right or for wrong, that the authentic voice is being lost because of AI. You're not going to hear folks often say, "Oh yeah, we don't pay it. You can submit it, but we don't pay attention because we don't know that it's your voice." That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm really suggesting is how you need to think about using it. And something that, and so we are paying attention to what our friends at USC are doing because it's important, and that's those short answer questions. AI can't help you there. But my sense is that those short answer responses, those should be answers from the heart. And we suspect when we see our short answer response, and today we only require one, but we may be changing in the future to really get at a genuine student voice. So that's a lot of words, but this is a really important environment to just have students and family members talking through and really thinking about the tools, the additional tools that students may have at their disposal.
I want to reiterate something I said earlier, that the essay and the short answer responses are the only places in the application where we really truly get to know the student. And it's not so much, like I said earlier, the quality of the sentence structure or the big words that the student uses. It's that authentic voice, as Andre said, that it's are getting to know the student and what they chose to share of themselves. I think that's so important. There's AI and there's generative AI. You should not be generating your essays, your short answers using an AI tool. If you need to brainstorm, if you need to help form an outline, if you're using AI to help you with your college search, that's a great tool. Go to Gemini, go to whatever tool you're using. You can put in like, these are what I'm looking for, what colleges have it. You'll be able to find lots of information, speed up your search for you. That's great. But you should not be generating those essays and things using an AI tool because you will have lost your voice in the process. So try to be as authentic as possible. And again, whether you're using AI or not, back in the day, it wasn't AI. It was how many times you had it edited by a counselor, a teacher, a family friend, an older relative, that you start losing your voice. This should sound like somebody that's 16 to 18 years old in the application process. We want to hear your voice in the application. So try to keep that there. Don't lose that out to automated resources that you might be using in the process.
Thank you, Risa. Okay, jumping around again a little bit. We touched on majors at different schools. This question is, when you're applying, if a student is unsure of a major, should they check the undecided box or pick something that they might be interested in?
I have a specific response to this that's very USC, and that's we don't allow students to list undecided as their first choice. even though we know a large number of our applicants are truly undecided. And the reason is that we found that they have a higher success rate of finding their major if they try something. So I'm going to give you a little example of thinking about that ice cream shop when you go in and they give you the little pink spoon and you get to try your different flavors. Think about your college majors that way. Try something. If you don't like it, move on and try something else. But students that come in undecided tend to stay undecided longer because they haven't picked anything to try. So we want you to try something. Now, having said that, USC has some categories on our application that you might be thinking, well, I don't know, do I want sociology or psychology? You can put down undecided within the social sciences. So at least we know which category you're in, or undecided within the natural sciences, because you haven't decided, is it biology or chemistry or neuroscience or whatnot, but you know you like science. Same thing goes for engineering. We've got 33 different majors in engineering, but you could just put down undeclared in engineering. But again, that's not because we're trying to force you to stay in a major. It's we're trying to help you figure it out as soon as possible. So you're with a cohort, you're taking some classes. We start classes in your major in your first semester to help you sample those. And if it's not the right fit, great time to move out of it instead of waiting 2 years to figure out choice. Now, I know that was fairly USC specific, so I'll let Andre jump in as well.
No, I think your answer is a great one. We are a place that will say you can be undecided, and we don't. We believe that your first year in our general education courses, that's a path. So what you have, students and families, is different approaches to get students to an end goal. And there are different ways to do it. But these are the kinds of questions, I appreciate that it's being asked. These are the kinds of questions that we hope that families and students are asking. And again, this idea, the sooner you are asking these questions, that places you ahead of the process, ahead of the game, if you will.
Nancy, could we have one
Thank
more
you.
question?
Yes, let's take one more question. Okay. This is a general one, and you've answered this in some ways, but I'll put it out there because it's showed up several times. How do we counsel our children to stand out in this process these days without adding crazy amounts of undue stress by pushing them into a million different directions, in addition to outstanding academics? Any advice for parents?
Yeah, I have two thoughts, and admittedly, I've evolved in my thinking here. As you look at the applications, and you think about what's being asked, make sure, number one, that you answer the questions. I could spend a lot of time talking about how sometimes applicants don't answer the question, don't understand the questions. So answer the questions. And my suggestion would be, before you put pen to paper, keystroke to you should have a conversation with your school counselor to be able to say, here's what I think I'm answering. What do you think, school counselor? Or if you have a good relationship with one of your favorite teachers, so that you, number one, you stand out, that you know how to follow direction. Here's the second of three things I would encourage you to do. And not all applications, not all colleges and universities will give you this opportunity, but when given the opportunity, all things being equal, if it feels like it's extra, you might want to do the extra thing. And here's what I mean by that. Earlier, Mary Beth mentioned the idea that on the Common Application, there's a little space where you can provide some additional information. So let's look at the activities, for example. And for those of you who are, I think the theme for me tonight has been oboe. So let's say you play a musical instrument. That doesn't mean you want to pursue music as your major. You're going to join the marching band or any of those things. You just like playing the oboe. It would be great to know why that, what does that do for you? And I picked the oboe, it could be anything. For me, it was playing chess while I was in high school. Doesn't mean that I was good at it, but I enjoyed being in that space. And I had a group of folks that I would play with. And as a high schooler, I rarely was able to get to checkmate, but I enjoyed that. So something that might seem, if you will, trivial, but if it matters to you and it matters enough that you would like someone else to know. And here's the third. When you think about those who are going to recommend you, in some schools like my school, we only ask for one recommendation. Other schools will ask for multiples. It's not always the individual that gave you the best grade, or it's not always the counselor that seems to be the most popular, but it's the individuals, the adults in the school community or at the place you volunteer or where you work who can help us understand things about you that we might not see otherwise, we might not know. Those things will help you stand out. Any combination of those three things, I think, will help us get to know you a little bit better. And something that was said earlier, because when it all comes down to it, we are trying to build a community, and not everyone in the community looks the same, and we get pretty excited about that.
Risa?
I'm going to just tag on to that real quick, that as Andre just said, not everyone looks the same. The differences in our applicants are our strengths. That's your strength. That's our strengths as a community on our campus when we bring in different types of students. It's totally great to be that introvert. You don't have to be the extrovert. You don't have to be the leader of every student organization. And I'm a little concerned with the way the question was prefaced of parents, if you are pushing your children into activities that they don't find joy in, please let off the pressure. Let them find their joy, their passions, because then they're going to be more authentic in their college search. They're going to be more authentic in presenting themselves in the application. If your student no longer wants to be in choir, it's totally fine if they drop choir. That's not going to hurt their application. We want to see students that find their passions, even if it's one thing that they enjoy. And if they spent the summer camping and hiking and getting to know nature, that looks just as fabulous if the student can speak to why that was important for them as the student that spent the entire summer doing research with a grad student from some Ivy League school. We want to see that passion and that interest from the student that is authentic.
You know, I was going to ask Risa to give us closing comments, but what you just said, I actually was recording that because it's wonderful advice from the two of you, my mentors, my professional colleagues, and my friends for a very long time. I really want to thank you for giving of your time an evening when you could be spending time. Where is that cute dog? Is he sound asleep? But if you're spending time with your family, you took time for Wolcott and the Tyree Institute. And I want to, on behalf of all of us, want to really thank you for doing this, and to remind our participants here that this recording will be posted on our website. And you can go to wolcottcollegeprep.org. And I cannot thank you. And Kelly and Nancy behind the scenes, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you've done. And I know that I often come to you, Risa and Andre, because I know, I'm going to ask the questions and you're going to turn those questions into wonderful advice. So love to both of you. And thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much. One last thought, just remember families, there's people on the other end reading the application. So just know that we're here, know that we're available to answer your questions as well.
Here, here. Thank you, everyone.
Night.
Bye.
You.